or the shift from consumption to thoughtful interaction with the environment. And the words say, if I can read upside down, human-powered transportation, every rotation of the wheel. Every rotation of the wheel is a revolution. So between Portland and San Francisco, I will have traveled 800 miles. That's 700,000 revolutions. So 700,000 revolutions equals a new way to move my body from point A to point B that people said you can't do that, including the people in the transition movement in Portland that I'm part of. We're supposed to be part of energy descent. And I said, we got to stop driving and we got to start reducing our electrical consumption. And so I said, I'm just going to cycle to San Francisco. And we got a blog, bloodonthetracks.info, which is keeping track of our cycling tour. And I don't know if Joel is here, my cycling companion. Is he here? Oh, right here. Joel Finkelstein is my companion who's riding with me, holding a bike trailer with all our gear from Portland to San Francisco. An angel arrived on the scene and enabled me to do this. And he's a great cyclist. And so, you know, the epiphany, or what, you know, some people don't believe in epiphanies, but just the change is still unfolding. I still feel very compromised. I still feel very stuck in industrial civilization, but I know I'm working my way as best I can to liberate myself from its assumptions, all the assumptions. I probably don't even still know all the assumptions. You know, I've been trying to look at the assumptions and say, wow, how could we have assumed that? How could I have assumed that the Vietnamese were really an enemy of mine? You know, like, wow, that is really... I mean, by the way, when I went to Vietnam, I was 27 and I had a master's degree and I was halfway through law school. So I have dealt with a lot of shame in my life, because it's one thing to say you went when you were 18 or 19. It's another to say you went when you were 27 and were a graduate student. It's like, wow. And I didn't tell people for 10 or 12 years after Vietnam that I'd been in Vietnam. I didn't want people to know that. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't be a person that would do that, because I'm better than that. I'm smarter than that. I was valedictorian in my grade school class. I was honor society in high school. I was active in my church. I was really a good boy. And I participated in carnage. Wow, that's pretty incredible.
Hi, thanks, Brian. It's nice to have your voice here. I was wondering if you get to talk to young vets or people that are planning on going into war, and if you found anything that's useful to say or do, or...
So the question is whether I talk to young people and who may be going into the military. Yeah, I've over the years I've talked in a lot of schools. I don't think I have any magic things to say. I express I talk about my own experiences and how dumbed down I was and how important consciousness is, or conscience. And but I'm living in a society that doesn't provide really much of an opportunity for young people to do anything but go in the military, unless they really had sharp parents or they had really unusual upbringing where they knew that they were going to do something other than just flop around in the job market, which is almost non-existent. So I have to just be aware that for many young people, they don't have a vision of life other than what the American way of life has presented to them, which is basically individualism versus cooperation, competition versus community, acquisition versus inquisition, meaning acquiring things rather than being curious. Capitalism requires us to be, in order to adapt and be considered successful and to be honored by your parents, those are kind of the main values that you learn to be successful. And those values go against our entire evolutionary nature. It's amazing. We're living in a culture that teaches us to be in a way that's totally in opposition to our nature, that formed over 5 million years. Empathy, not even considered important. We can't live without empathy. It's the most important human characteristic that bonds us together. Even if there's conflict, you do not stab the person you're in conflict with. You figure out a way to do that, because when you stab the other person, you're stabbing yourself. In the end, one way or the other. That's the leap. That's the evolutionary leap. We get it or we don't get it. And maybe, since we're part of evolution, our species is part of evolution, maybe we have had to get this far to learn that we either are going to learn this fundamental principle in the universe, or we become extinct because we chose not to get it. I don't know. I just know that we have it in us because it's genetically here. Cooperation and empathy are so deeply embedded in our viscera, not in our brain. Our brain learns ideology, but our body learns archetypes. I mean, our body learns archetypal characteristics that enable us to actually interact in food-sufficient cultures and requires cooperation. Clearly, there's going to be a big die-off. We've spent a whole century taking half of the carbon out of the ground and putting it in the air, water, and soil, which conceivably will create something even worse than nuclear winter. And in that century, we started driving private automobiles, and we started using tremendous amounts of electricity with the grid. It's just a blip in history. But we were born and raised in a blip, so it conditioned our thought structures and our behaviors. But it's just a blip. It's really a delusion that this is real. I mean, it's just really quite astounding that we have become this. I mean, including myself. I mean, you know, we're all in this. We're all in varying degrees and stuck in this, and so we are both part of the problem and part of the solution. And that requires us to all realize that we're all together in this journey. Mesha.
Brian, I see in the book that you have an older brother, and I'm wondering, is he still alive, and what kind of relationship do you have with him, and how your journey has affected your relationship with your family over the years?
The question was about my one sibling and my family, how my changes have been have affected my relationship with my family. My parents were shocked when I came back and said that I didn't want their church or their state or their religion or their government. I knew it was bullshit and I had to start over again. And that was kind of shocking to lower working class parents who thought everything was great. And my father and I never really ever were able to breach that to the day he died. My mother didn't understand me, but she was a kind person. So she was, you know, she wouldn't be harsh with me like my father would be. I just basically didn't spend much time with my parents all those years because I was just constantly invalidated by whatever they would say. I would go to Nicaragua and come back and report to them maybe one day a year what I'd found, and they would say, well, Jerry Falwell says this about Nicaragua, and so there was no discussion. My brother is 10 years older than me. We have a good relationship. He's a fairly sensitive, he's a retired history teacher, high school history teacher. He's a sensitive person. He's what I would call a very humane thinking person. He's not a radical, but he's a decent person, and he has always defended me and supported me through all my changes, even though he doesn't understand them all. He I think actually respects his baby brother, even though his friends in his town in Jamestown, New York, just deride him all the time for having this stupid brother that does these crazy things. I mean, he shares that with me. You know, he says, I have to listen to it, but I defend you, you know. He says, so that's just the way it is. I I'm sure that a lot